Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do a quick video on our Acura Legend here. So if you're unfamiliar with the cooling system on an Acura Legend, I suggest that you become very familiar with it because that is one of its weak points. But today specifically we're going to talk about how do you bleed the air out of an Acura Legend. There is the manual way, the book way if you will, and then there is the community way. Now, I gravitate towards the community way, and because it's a very sound and simple approach, and I believe it's actually more effective than the manual way from the Acura factory manual. So let's go ahead and talk about the differences real quick. So as you know, we've got your radiator, we've got our coolant passages, we've got our overflow over there, and we have this bleeder nipple right at the top here. And this is the way that the factory book service manual tells you to bleed the system. You go ahead and fill it up, put a little bit into the reservoir here, and then you turn on the engine, do all the things that I'm going to show you here in a minute with the community way, and you crack this to let the air out of the system. The problem with that method is it's highly inefficient. And what I mean by that is a lot of the air gets trapped in the heater core, in the passages behind the engine, and it takes a while for that air to cycle up into the radiator and into the main coolant passages at the top here. Now, eventually you could do it, but you're going to make also a large mess here trying to do so. It's not a very effective or an efficient way and often leaves a mess. So we're going to show you how to do that. The same thing, bleeding the air out in a more effective way, but in a more efficient way as well. And this is what we call a Lyle funnel or a spill-proof funnel, whichever you prefer to call it. It's a kit, and you can pick these up at Harbor Freight. You can order them on Amazon. They're pretty easy. The basis is we're going to take this radiator cap off, so we'll go ahead and do that. And we're going to go ahead and add this to the top of it, just like this. And by doing this, what we're creating is a connection point for air to be seamlessly vented through the top. So I'm going to go ahead and attach this to the top of the radiator and then pick back up. So here's the setup you should have. You should have your adapter, because the kit comes with a bunch of adapters. Make sure you get the right one for the radiator. Then you're going to want to put your stopper in there and then fill it up with a little bit of coolant. Now, if you're doing a complete flush and you've done a major service or something like that, you're obviously going to add more than what I have here. This is my routine process. Every couple of months, I try to bleed the air out. Sometimes it just gets in there from various different methods or weaknesses within the cooling system, so it really shouldn't have a need to be bled, but we're going to go ahead and do it anyways, and I do it every couple of months just for peace of mind. Now, once we have this all set up and we've got our coolant in there, now you can use any coolant you want that's compatible with Asian Honda cars. There's a lot of community speculation about aftermarket ones, green, blue, whatever. It really doesn't matter as long as it's formulated for Hondas and Acuras, because it has a boron-free formula, and it's going to reduce, it's called PAO. It'll, PAO-free, sorry. It's going to reduce the corrosion on aluminum parts. And that's really what we're looking for. The water pump, we don't want it to corrode, and that will make sure that your cooling system lasts a long time. So this is the setup that we're going to have here. So let's go ahead and jump into the car, and I'll go over how you're supposed to set that up. Once you're in the car, you want to go ahead and set your climate control to full hot. We're going to go ahead and crank it all the way up, and we're going to do a full off on the AC. We're also going to do a full blower motor. So all the way up to, I think it's 4 or 5, and we're going to take it off of auto. So we're going to do both vents there, and now we're going to go ahead and start the car, and we're going to let it warm up to temperature because we want the thermostat to go ahead and open. So this will be on full on. This will open up the passages for the heater core. And now we're going to go back out to the under hood view so we can show you how to do that. So here is our setup. Like I said, We've also now have the engine running, so we're going to get a little bit of a ripple, and we're looking for air bubbles to come out. Now this whole process is going to take about 30 to 45 minutes, depending on how much air is there. Now what you want to do is make sure that the lower thermostat, or the lower hose where the thermostat attaches to, opens. And the reason why is that if you just do this right now, yeah, you might get some bubbles out of it, but what you're not going to get is the full bubbles coming out because that thermostat hasn't opened, and now you still have air down below, even though you've bled some of it out up here. So that's critical. Make sure that that lower radiator hose gets warm, and the only way that it gets warm is when the thermostat opens. So we're going to go ahead and let this heat up, and then we'll join you back after the car is warm. The other thing that you should do is make sure that your cooling fans turn on while you're waiting for this car to warm up. So your gauge will indicate when it's up to operating temperature, but your thermostat opening and the switch at the bottom of the radiator should indicate that there's warm coolant moving through the system into the radiator. The car has actually warmed up to the point where it's dumping that hot coolant back into the radiator. Eventually your fan should kick on. Now if your fans don't kick on, you've probably got a bigger issue going on, either with the fan control module, the timer module, the switch that's in the bottom of the radiator, or some sort of fan relay motor issue. So just keep an eye out on that. Also keep guarded that as you check the bottom radiator hose that your hand isn't in the way of those fans. That way you don't accidentally get injured. So one thing I do while I'm waiting for it to warm up is you just don't want your engine to idle. It's never good for an engine to idle and just stay at a constant RPM because it actually increases wear. Oil doesn't actually get into the top end of the motor as much because it's not creating enough RPM to spin the oil pump. So one thing I'll do is I'll reach behind here and I'll just grab the throttle and kind of hold it at a higher RPM. This will allow it to warm up faster, but it'll also get some motor oil to the top of the heads a little bit better by increasing the RPM of that oil pump. And look, we're starting to see a little bit of air in there that was trapped in there. Small little bubbles, yep. And that's an indicator that the thermostat is probably starting to open up just a little bit. Let's reach down and see if we can see that. Nope. It's not quite opened up yet. It takes a while. That's why this process takes about 30 to 45 minutes, because you have to wait so long for the engine to get warmed up and then that thermostat to open. But also, you have a cycle of air bubbles that will get trapped in there, and it's often good to just make sure that you're very thorough here. But you can also see the downside of using that. Your very little air is going to get released through that bleeder nipple over there, but a ton of air gets released over here. So the reason why you don't want air in this system is because it creates dead pockets within the engine sometimes, and those dead pockets get superheated, and those superheated air pockets will create some failure points. And that's why I always preach about, people making sure that they stay on top of the coolant system on an Acura Legend. It's highly inefficient, not designed correctly in my opinion, and it introduces so much air into the whole coolant passages that it creates dead spots along the cylinders where the cooling jackets are. So if you know a head design, the head has jackets of coolant that go around the cylinder, and if you had a dead zone right there, it would cook that head gasket just enough to create little micro fractures, and over time it will progress until you have a full head gasket failure. So here, what we're doing is making sure that we minimize, or at least eliminate, hopefully, all those air pockets that are potentially possible. We'll make sure we do a very thorough job. Don't rush this. 30 to 45 minutes, like I said. Okay, so our lower radiator hose is starting to get warm. That's indicating that we do have the thermostat starting to open. So what we're going to do is give it some RPM. And we've got a bunch of air coming out. That's an indicator that we've got air trapped in there. So we're going to keep on doing this until we get all that air out. There we go. Starting to slow down a little bit. And we can squeeze the upper radiator hose. Just be careful about it being hot. So you can do that a little bit. Also, your fans should be kicking on, so keep an eye out for that. But surprisingly, there is a bunch of air in here, even though we've bled this car after our major work. It's not surprising. These type of graphite head gaskets and their low torque on the heads creates that gap. If you watch my video about the head gasket failure, that's majority of where that's coming from. The heads lift a little bit and separate from the head gasket. It's not a major issue as long as it reseals and it doesn't create fractures, but it does allow enough air to get into the system over time, over long durations. And so it's why I do this probably every other month when I'm driving it during the summer. So keep at it. Make sure that you keep on going until all the air is out. Now after about 35-45 minutes, you're still battling that air. It's a strong indication that you might have a bigger issue going on. So let's keep on working at it, and we'll see how long it takes us here. We got the clock running. Okay, we've let this run for almost 30 minutes, just shy of that, and we're not seeing any more air coming out of here. Maybe just a little small bubbles here and there, and nothing major though, no big air bubbles, and that's what we're aiming for. The little ones we'd like to get to, but the big ones are the ones that create those pockets. Oh, I just spoke too soon. We got one that just floated up to the top here. So not a lot. I think we can start to spin down the engine here, and we'll let this cool down. So one thing I'll say is while it's cooling down, don't try to disconnect it. Make sure that you keep yourself safe during this process, even though you can kind of cork it and then disconnect it and put everything back together. Fluid expansion has occurred, and so we want that fluid to settle back down and prevent any dead pockets of air that may happen from just it naturally cooling and then the contraction of the fluid. The other thing that I'll note is that if for some reason you're driving along and you're like, hey, I have no heat, that is a strong indication that you've got an air pocket in your heater core, which since everything's interconnected and you use this coolant, you want to make sure that you address that as soon as possible, because you've got so much air in the system at that point that you're actually circulating air through the system. That's going to have an effect on your ability to cool. Even though your gauge may not indicate a problem, that is a strong indicator that you have a problem and you're pushing air into the cooling system. Additionally, if you start up the car, you've got it set up like this and it just shoots up coolant because of the air rising up. That's a strong indication that you have a head gasket. So just keep an eye out on those couple of things. But for this video, we're pretty much wrapped up. Just make sure that you, like I said, you let it kind of condense back down into the radiator. You're not creating any more pockets of air that way. Additionally, make sure that you check your overflow and that it has coolant in there. Keep it clean so you can see it easier, and make sure that the hose isn't pinched off. That'll make sure that you have a good and safe cooling system, and that'll do it on this video, and we'll see you on the next one.